You are listening to Sexploration with Monika. We're talking about sex, baby. We're talking about you and me. So, Shameless, ooh, Heather Atles, and you're a relationship and sexuality coach. And I'm so excited to have you on today. Thanks
Oh,
for joining
thanks.
me.
Thanks, Monica. It's really, really a pleasure to be here. I've been wanting to do your show. I'm glad we finally found a time that worked for both of us.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the different modalities. We mentioned Somatica. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So, like you said, I started coaching professionally about a year ago. And one of the modalities I've studied is the Somatica method. It was developed here in San Francisco by two coaches who recognized that there was such a need for more people with this relationship, sex, and intimacy specialty that they created a school because they needed to create more, help bring up more coaches so they
Right.
can actually refer people because the need was just so great. And the Somatica method is really a body-based method, hence, soma is body. And so it's really one of the fundamental tenets of it is getting to listen to and understand our body responses and how the body is a source of wisdom. So many people just live from the neck up. And
Yeah.
yeah, because our culture really supports,
Yeah.
thought and intellect, and we're not really taught and infrequently modeled using the body as
How to
another
deal with,
source of
yeah, the information,
yeah.
right, that is present in our body. And it helps us be more present in the moment as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. When we can focus on our sensations rather than just our mind chatter.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's that phrase, the biggest sexual organ is your brain, and
Totally.
that's not wrong.
Right.
However,
Actually, there is more surface area on your skin,
exactly.
but your brain is very important when it comes to being turned on.
Absolutely.
But you have to be
Absolutely.
present to get your mind to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot, there are people that their sexual experience exists entirely
In their mind.
minds.
Right.
And
That's true.
And yeah, and I love that
Right.
for them.
Totally.
For me, my body is a big part of my sexual experience.
Totally.
And
Well, and it's a both and.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the work that I do is pleasure centered. And so for me, the pleasure of the body as well as like my brain getting lit up is important.
Totally.
And so I do work with thoughts, of course, and really bringing people into their bodies and their desires and the freedom of feeling and expressing what they really want.
Yeah. And how do you talk with your clients about, when they're searching for different ideas to choose or different patterns? How do you help them?
So there's a process, and what I love about coaching versus a traditional, like licensed MFT therapy, for example, is that it's very experiential. So traditional therapy very often is like a one-way relationship, and the therapist acts as like a sounding board. But under the certification that I'm working under, I bring my whole self to the experience. So we actually create what I like to call a relationship lab.
Oh,
And in the lab, we run experiments.
yeah, exactly.
And
What happens if we try this?
exactly.
How does
And
this feel?
yeah.
Right.
So to backtrack a little bit, when I'm working, you said, I think you asked how we get started.
Totally.
Yeah. So clients will come to me with any number of concerns, whether it's like, low sex or no sex in their relationship, or problems with performance
Right.
or concerns about skills or just being up in their heads.
Orgasm.
Exactly. And so the first part of the relationship is like any other relationship. We get to know each other.
Right.
And what I bring to it is a real curiosity about what they care about, what their goals are, where they want to go.
Right.
And then also, I think kind of distinctive from traditional therapy is we really work goal oriented.
Right.
And we check in on the milestones along the way. And I keep in my mind, even if we go on tangents, because there's always tangents.
Yeah,
you know?
of course.
I might be wanting to increase my, or a client might want to increase their skills because they
Right.
get up in their head when they're with their partner. But, then something happens. There's,
Right.
A fight, or there's a death in the family or anything like
Right.
that. I meet the person where they are in any given session. And I do try to always come back to like, okay, in my mind and what we've discussed, these are your goals and what are the different avenues we can take to get to your goals.
Yeah. And you also talk about nonviolent communication.
Yeah,
as one
so-
of your modalities.
Sure. Like I was saying to you before we started, I'm trained in the Somatica method. However, I've spent more than half my life doing personal self-actualization work. Yeah.
Totally.
It's been something I had to do because of my own background and wanting
Well, and
more joy
experimenting.
and happiness.
Yeah,
Yeah. But I really came from a place of like my own personal trauma recovery. And so I was motivated.
Right.
And
Right.
so it just put me on this path to learning all these different ways that people have discovered to like unlock more joy, happiness, self-expression, juicy, fulfilling, compassionate relationships.
Totally.
And so one of the modalities I've studied is nonviolent communication.
Right.
And as people will say, communication is a cornerstone to good relationships, right?
That's absolutely true.
And one of the things I love about nonviolent communication is that it really starts with empathy. It's not just what you say, but you're checking in with how you feel and you're checking in with how the other person feels. And with that modality in particular, it really focuses on that attunement, as does Somatica, actually. Attunement is really important. So attunement means like really checking in with yourself. What am I, self-attunement, that is. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? What are my body sensations? And then noticing what's going on for the other person.
Totally.
Empathy is imagining and feeling the feelings that the other person is experiencing.
Right.
And that's connection.
Right. And you get into those kind of resonant spaces, even like what I have been finding like over the years is even with something as simple as building rapport, like you start to really, make eye contact and smile and even those tiny, small, simple things. And then what you end up doing is you're, matching brainwave states and like it goes so deep where, it's just something simple like, okay, and now we're smiling at each other. But then, what really happens is, you start to get on the same page with each other.
Absolutely. Energy is contagious.
Totally.
And you've known me so long.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
20 years
A
now
bajillion
or
years
something.
now. Yeah.
And when you first met me, I was a
Could have been
performer.
longer than that, but
Ah.
we're not even counting. Yeah.
We're not counting. We're not counting. A bajillion years.
A jillion.
You haven't aged a day.
Right. You neither.
Thank you. Well, when you first met me, I was a performer.
Right.
I still do some performing.
Yeah.
And I really learned at that time, in that phase of my professional trajectory, how if I'm nervous
Right.
before I go on,
Right.
the audience is nervous. And I
Totally.
did a high stakes, like tightrope walking freestyle rapping.
Yeah,
And so,
totally.
I wasn't, I was doing a lot of like, I had to be in the moment.
Yeah.
But I had this pressure on myself and I would notice, and I notice it even a little now, like nervous that
Right.
we're on and we're live. And I feel, I was doing this when we were getting started. I was like, okay, self-attune. You're going to talk about
Totally.
attunement. And then notice the heart flutters,
Yeah.
the buzz of excitement. And what I noticed in performing live, if I was nervous, the audience is nervous. If I'm just having fun, if I'm just excited, if I'm just connecting, then the audience doesn't care if I do a technically good job.
Yeah.
They're like worried for me. And I can do a crappy job, but I'm having a great time. And they're just bouncing and having a good time too. And it's the same, just like you were saying, that resonance happens in relationships, and it happens when we're building relationships, and also if we're 10 years into a relationship.
Yeah, exactly. So what are some of the things that you explore when you're starting to get to know your clients, or when they hit a bump in the road?
Well, when I'm starting to get to know my clients, I do my best to just draw them out in a way that makes them feel safe and comfortable. And honestly, people have so much shame around sex.
Totally.
Yeah. And so a big part of my job in the beginning, and I do this like just naturally because I've had to learn it myself, is Deshamification. Totally. It's not a real word. I think that maybe the Somatica founders might have invented it because there's not a word for it. Like to remove the shame or to lessen the shame. You know, it's like...
Or just acknowledge it and then be like, okay, that's there, but moving forward.
Yeah, acknowledging that it's there, but also taking some of the air out of the balloon.
Right, totally.
You know, so many times people feel this shame and it's this...
by it.
Yeah, it's a secret, or it's just, you know, it's beyond embarrassing. It's like, I feel bad about myself because of this, you know, thing. And so creating the safety to talk about the thing, whether it's like, oh, my fantasies are really weird, or the thing I want to do with my partner is like, or I can't believe this. As a feminist, I would want this.
Right.
So taking out, like, giving it some airtime. And I have a few techniques I use to sort of lessen the impact of that fear, concern, shame.
So are there things specifically, like, let's talk about feminism, because I think definitely as a feminist, you know, I sometimes want things that I'm like, oh, I can't believe that I do want that. Like the whole little girl thing. Like, why do I even, but that totally is hot for me, right? Yeah. And so it's like, okay, so I'm not really like a little girl. I'm obviously a grown woman, but like, how do I play with that idea of, ooh, daddy, but without like, you know, not making myself wrong, not making my partner wrong, but just playing in this space, right?
Yeah, you bring up something really important here, which, as you always do, which is like when we get outside of like vanilla sex or you know, just the quote normal, I want to say.
But there's so many shades of normal.
Exactly. But getting into some of these things that are, you know, you might consider kinky or not mainstream, or you know, things like age play or BDSM or domination and submission, bondage, you know, sadomasochism, all those things. Or just anything that, you know, maybe you have a thought in your head like, this is kind of weird. Tantra. Yeah. So what you're talking about in specifically age play, you know, a lot of people find that really, really hot.
Right.
And the idea is like, yes, of course, you know, as a feminist, it would be wrong to have a sexual, to have a sexual encounter with a child.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's harming someone.
Totally.
But you're a grown woman, as you said. You're not being harmed. This is actually something you want. You find hot. It's pleasurable. And you have agency in it.
Right. And it's also play. And it's everyone's just playing the game that we're...
Yeah, so here's the thing.
Ages,
sometimes some of these fantasies do come from early childhood wounds. And what we do is we recreate it, but this time we're in charge.
Right.
This time, even when we're submissive, we're calling the shots.
Totally.
We're actually in power, claiming what we want and finding healthy ways to do it with consent. So that's very, very powerful. That's very, very feminist.
Yeah. And transformative.
And it can be healing and transformative. So there's the cherry on top.
Woohoo! Yeah, it's so fun to, like, I mean, because we've been friends for such a long time and we went to Burning Man together and all these, different experiences, like just seeing like, and I definitely want to learn even more about Somatica. We talked a little bit about it.
There's so much to share.
Yeah, exactly. So these kind of body-based approaches to consciousness, let's talk more about that now.
Oh, sure. Well,
because it's more about being present in this moment.
Absolutely. And as you said in the intro, you called me Shameless, which is how you've met me, and it's still my first name.
Shame is lame.
I learned recently, actually, that that's not really appropriate to say anymore.
Really?
Yeah. So we'll do a little tangent. No, I went to this workshop because I'm always going to like workshops and studying
learning
different
more.
modalities and learning more.
Sure.
And
oh my gosh.
Yeah, I learned
concept.
another one I'll tell you in a second that I just learned the other day, maybe yesterday even.
So excited.
No, but like, would you say like, oh, God, this weather is disabled?
Oh, right.
So it's just it's not as inclusive to people with disabilities to use lame pejoratively.
Oh,
I have to find a new rhyme.
Oh.
Because I do want to be inclusive. And in fact, one of the books that I have that I haven't gotten to yet, because I have a stack of reading like most people, but it's about sex with disabilities.
Totally.
And I wouldn't
know that's huge.
Yeah.
It's a huge idea.
Yeah.
Sex positivity.
Yeah.
Because people with disabilities, they have orgasms and, everything. And you have orgasms with your earlobe now, right?
Well, I wish I did, but
you can. You can just change your brain. Yeah, you can change the way your brain perceives pleasure.
That's true, and actually,
anything is possible.
That's what coaching is about. Actually, I'm sure you've heard the term that neurons that fire together wire together. So in the lab, we get to practice new sensations, new concepts, new thought patterns, new body response, neural pathway firing.
Totally.
And that's why the lab is so great, because sometimes something just seems so out of reach. And so even though I'm not your partner, like if you were coming in and working with me, we develop this relationship and you get the experience of feeling in your body this thing that seemed impossible before, or understanding and creating these new, wired together neural pathways that just like were, completely foreign to you prior to having the experience in the lab. And each week as we work together, you get more and more of that. Right. The other metaphor I like to use is it's like a gym. And, you go to the gym and you lift those dumbbells, not because you're going to be out in the street and there's a 15-pound dumbbell in your way. Right. But you then have the muscles so that no matter what heavy weight you have to lift, you have the muscle memory of how to do it safely, without getting injured, or like as, safely as possible, we'll just say, because sometimes hurts happen, of course. Yeah. But it's not a dumbbell you're lifting, but it's you know how to do it. You have the strength, you have the understanding, the muscle memory. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do we move forward and think, okay, so especially because, relationships are not always easy, and things come up, and things like, death in the family, or, really, especially, life changes, like, someone passes away, and it's just such a huge blow. And how do we be present in the moment and kind of roll with those punches, even though, things are different and things don't feel the same?
Yeah, you bring up a good point, is that our relationships are impacted by life stuff, as well as the interpersonal stuff between, your partner and you, or you and I, or like whatever that dyad or triad or whatever configuration it is. There's not just what happens between us, but there's what happens in life, like death, moving,
stress,
job change, just all these things come in. And part of the muscle that we build, one of the muscles that we build, or one of the experiments we run, or we do in the office, in my session space, is
in the lab.
In the lab, we learn processing disappointments. To be really great at relationships, you need a lot of different skills. And one of them is the skill of processing your disappointment.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And resiliency. Like,
Absolutely.
okay, even though that happened, here's how we can maybe move forward and
we
not make each other wrong.
Yeah. Well, that's where a lot of my communication training comes in as well. So, now I remembered. I was like, she asked me something about shame, or I was introducing myself as Shameless, and so I was going to circle back to that, and it was niggling at my brain. So I'll do that first, and then I'll come back to this this second question.
Sure.
So we were talking about feeling things in the body.
Yeah.
And this does relate, actually. So when we first met, her name is Shameless Heather, and still is to a lot of people. And the reason I developed that name was because, as I had alluded to, I had early childhood traumas, like many people do. There's big T trauma and little T traumas. And I was cut off from my body, and I thought my body was wrong and unattractive. And I remember thinking as in early puberty, when I was discovering masturbation and sex on my terms and things like that, that I was thinking like, oh God, I'm going to have to pay someone to have sex with me because I'm so disgusting. And then I'm thinking like, and I'm attracted to men, and I was thinking, I don't even know if they make male prostitutes, and if they did, where would I find one? And it was, before the internet.
Sure.
And just feeling so much shame and disconnection and rejection of my own body.
Right.
And what I've discovered in, even in the early work I was doing in my 20s, was how really wise my body is. And not just that, like how much pleasure is available to me. Totally. And as you've said, the ability to drop into the present moment and notice how my body is responding. What are the sensations? What are the feeling states that I'm in? And using it as an oracle in a way for what's true for me, what's right for me. Yeah.
And that also is a bridge to like kind of transcendent brainwave states and like, okay, how can we really connect to what can go beyond like just the, interpersonal things. But I mean, in many ways, sex is kind of like, we can go to so many different places.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so to bring it back to what you were talking about, like stress management and like
dealing with orgasm, blah, blah, blah.
Well, dealing with like what happens when life starts a lifing on you, and you still want to remain in connection.
Sure.
And so very often when we're under like stress, whether it's the death of someone we care about or a big move or just got fired or any number of things, even existential crisis of the global warming and the, things like that.
Yeah, there's a lot.
What I've noticed for myself, and I see this in people I work with, is that we can have a feeling reaction like I'm stressed or I'm scared or I'm angry. And some of these feelings are not like really like socially acceptable, or you don't want to just dump it on your partner when it's not about them kind of thing. And our bodies are really amazing. Like we can clamp down on a feeling and keep it there, so that we don't just blow up on others, or we don't just lose our minds. But it doesn't just dissipate.
Not processing it.
It's not being processed.
Right.
And it doesn't just dissipate on its own.
How do you move through those? Because you don't want to like clamp down and like keep
Yeah.
stress.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how many people do you know that are like, oh, my shoulders are so tight, and they'll just blame it on the keyboard or something.
Right.
I would counter that. You're probably storing some emotion there as well. And so in my practice, creating the safe, deshamified place to actually express these things, move them through the body. Sometimes talking is great, and talk therapy can be great, but sometimes it's movement, sometimes it's touch, sometimes it's getting really like in your body in ways that you don't do out in regular life.
Right.
And you may not feel like comfortable doing with your partner. Or sometimes when I work with couples, we do very physical things and vocal things that aren't just talk to move things through the body.
Like what?
Well, there's
like singing?
Or
like chanting?
Like groaning, grunting, sighing.
Sure.
Just different ways.
Those guttural sounds, they need to... And, it's energy.
It is.
You don't want to trap the energy.
Yeah. And sometimes it's, and very often, I always try to link it back to the breath also. Our breath is so vital.
Totally.
To every part of our existence. And I know for myself, when I hit that stressor, or I'm even like in a tense conversation or whatever, like my breath gets shallow, or if I'm upset, I'll even hold my breath. Like if I'm rushing around trying to like get out the door for something, I'll be like, okay, what next? How do I, and I'll be holding my breath.
Sure.
And because of my training and my practice of this for a while now, I will notice like, oh, I'm starting to feel even more anxious. And I have a practice now. I'm going like, okay, return it to the breath. Return it to the breath. And I do this with my clients. I see couples get into like situations where it's like I can see the temperature rising in the room, and I'll just slow us down, come back to breath. And that's such a great way to self-regulate.
Totally. Yeah. And there's different strategies like, I don't know, clearing the vagus nerve, like there's a big nerve that runs through your body, and you can even just a sigh. And just reset. To like, okay, what are we present to, and, how can we explore and make the world better together, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that vagus nerve is powerful. And when we're activated, or as some people might call it, triggered. We, it is, that vagus nerve is like firing the amygdala and like getting, then that's when, I can get in my head.
Stress response.
The hormones are flowing, and getting to where it's like, when we call like flow states, like when you're just
when you're good, when you're in a flow state.
When you're in the flow state and you're just in the present moment,
working.
Things are just going along naturally, and you're not trying too hard. That vagus nerve is just relaxed. It's like out of the way, and so.
And how to get from stress, like cortisols and like, I'm triggered, to like, I'm flowing. Life is good. Yeah. This is easy.
Yeah.
Like, what are some of the ways that we can get from here to there?
Well, we were talking about the trajectory of like a client relationship, and I think that's a great segue, because I work with both individuals and couples, and I'm open to working with polycules and whatever relationship configurations there are. And sometimes I'm working with an individual who is part of a couple, and they come to me because they notice that they're activated a lot, like with their partner, and they really want to have loving connection. They want to have great sex. They want to feel intimate, and there's these blocks getting in the way. And so when I'm working with either a couple or a part of a couple, or just even a single person who's noticing that they're not having as much access to that flow, that freedom, that self-expression, that self-confidence, then we get to do some of this work around unburdening. And this is where another modality that I use comes in, called internal family systems.
Oh, yeah.
And this one recognizes
Like your inner family.
Your inner family, exactly.
Yeah.
So this inner family, we all have like well, I believe, maybe other people don't, but I believe that we all have this like kind of multiplicity
Of parts of ourselves.
Exactly.
That we have to work with. Because
We have to work
you.
with these parts. Yeah.
Your primal, your romantic, your whatever you call these parts.
Right. So in internal family systems, there are protectors, these parts that come out that protect us from getting overwhelmed by these big feelings, these trauma responses.
Right.
And so...
And you developed these when you were really young to keep yourself safe.
Yeah.
And are they serving you now?
Right. Are they doing an appropriate task for the present moment? Or... You know, in internal family systems, these parts can be like parentified adults.
Right.
They really think they're doing the best thing for you to keep you safe, but really they're doing something that they got that job when you were 6 years old and, you know, you got lost at the grocery store.
Right.
You know, and it's like, you're freaking out.
Cortisol,
and it's like, you know what? I am never going to lose sight of someone I care about again.
Sure.
And so I'm going to do everything to keep that relationship, even if it doesn't serve me, intact. You know, or it could be, you know, a little later you're in middle school or junior high, and you're getting bullied, and so a protector is like, I am not going to let those horrible feelings happen again, and so I'm going to do whatever it takes to not be humiliated.
Right.
And so that's where like the inner critic comes in, because the inner critic isn't there to like really shame you for not being enough, or you're too fat, or you're too loud, or whatever the ways that we get told we're too much, or you're not enough, you're not pretty enough, or you're not tall enough. And it comes in to save us from those feelings of humiliation by keeping us from taking risks and being in a position to be ostracized or humiliated again.
And how do you like reprogram, like, oh, thank you for doing that job back in that time, but now I'm gonna give you a new job?
You know what we do?
Give you a little...
Yeah. So you're on the right track here. We got to get to know these parts of ourselves.
Right.
And we do what we work towards is having more access to, in internal family systems, what's called the self, and it's like the capital S self. And depending on your background, your spiritual bent, your understanding of the world, you might call it like your connection to your inner wisdom, your connection to source energy, your connection to God, your connection to something greater than yourself that is very wise. Or if that's not your leaning, just knowing that you have this inner wisdom that's your more grown-up self, the capital S self, that is curious about these parts and compassionate towards them. Not just saying like, shut up, critical voice, or shut up, the voice that makes me shop instead of feel my feelings, or eat instead of feel my feelings. It's just curious, like, what are they protecting me from? Why is this job so important to this part of me? How can I meet this part with my own calm energy and confidence
and compassion
to know that like it's there for a reason. And very often when we go into some of these, it's a very visual or visualization meditative practice in a way, is we meet these parts and we ask them like, what are you afraid of? Not in this stop doing it, but like, what are you really worried about? And then very often when we can see this part as a part of us and not just us, we're all this melange of parts. And we can ask a specific part. Like for me, I have a part that is really afraid of my insomnia. a better sleeper now than I was early in my trauma recovery stuff. But there's a part that comes out and does not want me to put my head on the pillow and ruminate. And so bringing some curiosity to that and calmness, I can see it as a part that's separate from me, and start to unburden it from this job it has to do, which is, I avoid sleep when I'm activated. I want to go to bed. Like other parts of me really are tired and want to go to bed. My body is physically tired, and I'm afraid that I'm going to be laying there with insomnia and not able to fall asleep, and it's going to be hell.
Right.
And so getting to know why this part is doing its job, and then asking the part if it sees me, if it sees myself. And so often these parts see us as that young person who had a trauma or a harm and doesn't actually know us as our grown-up selves. And as they get to know us, that there's a grown-up self behind the wheel, they like stop their grip so hard on the wheel.
Right.
Like it's like, if you imagine that a part, like getting hijacked or carjacked, using the metaphor of at the wheel, the part jumps in, hijacks, takes the wheel and takes over. And suddenly I'm shopping or I'm scrolling or I'm not going to bed.
Right.
And becoming friends with that part, and it can learn to trust myself.
Right.
And it becomes unburdened from that job of keeping me safe from insomnia.
Right. And so what are some of the other strategies?
I went on a little long tangent there.
No, because I have the same thing as well, where, it's hard for me to get to sleep. So I have like all of these different systems, like turning down the lights and, like I have a full like bedtime ritual and like I do all of these different healing practices and I listen to, different kinds of musics and recordings and like all of these different strategies because, hitting the pillow can be so difficult, but we have to, figure out like, what do we need for self-care? So we're not just, going crazy with our mind in the middle of the night.
Yeah. So I love that you said you have all these different strategies. And, as I've said, I've been doing
meditation, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Lots of things.
I have been, for my own self-care, studying different modalities since, I was in my early 20s. And different things work for different people. And so, going back to that, like, relationship trajectory with my clients is, once I've gotten to know them and I've we've run different experiments in the lab, tried different weights in the gym or tried different machines in the gym, let's say. People tend to gravitate towards things that work for them, And so then we go down that path a little more. So for some clients, this internal family systems work is great. For some clients, it's, doing much more of the body-based physical stuff. And I mean, I bring that into pretty much everything, because even in the more traditional talk or meditative stuff, I still want to bring it back into the body. But running into relationship where you're just grinding your gears, and you're trying so hard to explain your point of view. I might bring in and teach nonviolent communication skills and relationship repair skills. Yeah, you want to dive into that one for a second?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. So I don't know if you've had this
relationship repair skills.
Yeah. Like I was saying, there's all these skills. If you want to be amazing at relating, processing
and
disappointment, and you do, and you are, repair is vital.
Yeah.
Because a rupture is going to happen.
It's so easy to like have a disagreement just because you are communicating humans.
Yeah. Have a misunderstanding.
Yeah.
Have, being let down or letting someone down, or just
not on purpose.
Being activated and blurting something.
Right. Triggered.
Yeah. So, repair is so vital, and because we want to come back into connection. And so if you have a rupture, like, how do you get back to connection?
Totally.
So often, people just think like, I just want to apologize. I want to make it better. I want to fix it, and without the foundation of feeling understood, apologies can feel empty. And promises can feel and become empty when it's like, I'll never do that again. And what I love about, and this is, I want to credit Somatica with this tool in my toolkit, is there's actually a really clear process for a relationship repair. And it starts with just noticing your body and your feeling state and how triggered or activated you are. And it's a great idea not to try to do this when you're, on a scale of 1 to 10, above a like 3 or 4.
Right.
So you gotta self-regulate.
And it does take some time to get untriggered when you're actually in that state of like adrenal trigger.
Yeah. But if you're, courageous and you've got some skills, you might be able to have these kinds of conversations when you're more like a 5 or something. And so first you just decide, like, usually it's great if the more activated person can go first, because this process will help with the regulation so that the person will be able to receive their, when it's say you were more activated and you went first. When it was my turn, you have more of a clearing, more spaciousness to actually receive what I'm saying. And then the next step is just like you would share, vulnerably about what you're feeling, what happened, your point of view. And my job is to listen with empathy. And that takes some practice, because so often in our culture, we're just supported in listening for, here's what I want to say back.
Right.
And so we're not really listening. We kind of have to develop this skill to be able to.
What I think I heard you say was.
Yeah. But even before we reflect it back, to table our own reactions and responses to see if we really can get into the other person's point of view, their feelings, their perspective. And so then we respond empathically. It sounds like you're feeling this. We mirror back to the person what we took in, what we were able to hear, both in like, what you said, like XYZ happened, but more importantly, kind of like the feeling state that you're expressing, either in what you're saying or how your body is expressing it. I mirror back to you that I get it. And then here's where it diverges from a lot of typical like processes, is there's not an apology necessarily. So often, like just saying like, I heard you and I'm sorry, it doesn't really land. So what I love about this Somatica repair process is that what we do is we acknowledge, own, and like cop to the things about, like, I would say, like, if it was you and I in this model, the things about me that make it challenging to be in a relationship with, because we all have that.
Right.
So, suppose you were, upset with me because I was late today and I'm always late and it's just so irritating to you.
Right.
Rather than saying, oh my God, I'm so sorry I'm late, I won't be late again. We both know that like a person who's chronically late, they may promise up and down the block that they're not going to be late again. And that's just who they are. They're going to be late. And so rather than do all of that, song and dance, I would just say like, I get that it's really, it stresses you out. You've got a radio show to do here and I was late and you're mad. And you know what? I totally own that I am the person that like, I just run late and it sucks. And I know people are counting on me and I'm not delivering on it. And it's just, it's just painful for the people involved. And it's part of being in relationship with me.
Sure.
And so what that does for the receiver of that information is it's like, oh my God, I'm not crazy. They get how annoying this trait of theirs is.
Right.
And it's like, I feel seen, feel understood.
Right.
And now there's like spaciousness for connection again.
Right. Right. Interesting. Not that she was actually late.
I wasn't late. That's an easy example to use.
Right, totally. But it's also like, rather than like making the person wrong and like trying to get them to change their behavior, then you're just accepting and moving forward.
Yeah. Well, what's lovely about it in my own life is I realize it's like I'm not asking the person to change or the person, and I'm not promising to change. I may be motivated myself to work on it, but it's a different experience if I'm motivated from myself because there's something that I want. But to bring it back to like sex as an example, I work with couples where they're not having the frequency or the type of sex that they want. And so rather than, and they might get into these big heated emotional conversations about it.
Right.
And so rather than like apologizing and saying I'm going to do it different, or I'm going to explore this area that I'm really uncomfortable about right now, what they can do is, really own that, like, when you say, like, when you reject my bids for sex, like, I feel this and that.
Right.
And so the other person will say, like, rather than say like, okay, I'm going to try harder, I'm going to get my mojo up and things like that, which they may be motivated to do on their own. What they can say is like, okay, I hear you're feeling really rejected. And I know that I'm someone that doesn't feel spontaneous desire.
Right.
That's
a huge thing. I love. I just learned about spontaneous desire, and then what was the other one? Spontaneous desire, and then
it's
reflexive,
responsive desire. Yeah. I hope I'm getting that word right.
No, but responsive desire, and then that way it really helps you that your partner is like turned on, and that helps you get turned on. So just learning about the kinds of desire that people can have can be so healing.
It's healing. It's liberating, because especially if you have a couple, that one person is spontaneous, the wind can blow and they're turned on.
Totally.
And the other person really needs some stimuli in order to be in the mood. Well, the person that is,
or they're stressed out,
like there's the gas pedal and the brake.
Yes, exactly.
And some people, it's like, it's so easy to just hit that gas pedal. And, they don't need to have necessarily a sensual or sexual stimuli to just be feeling it like they want some. And thinking that when you think like, well, isn't that how everybody is? Like, and maybe there's something wrong with my partner if they're not as sexual as me. My partner may be as sexual or as interested in having sex. It just doesn't occur spontaneously, and they need a stimuli.
Right.
And so
everyone has different pathways.
Yeah.
And stress is huge.
Oh, it puts the brakes on. Yeah.
Totally. So how do we deal with that? Like, what do you have special, like, date nights, or what are some of your
Are you talking about when there's like desire discrepancies?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So first of all, it's incredibly common,
Totally.
So one of the first steps is just like deshamifying it. But you guys have different ways of expressing on maybe different levels of desire for sex. And so it's like, that's just normal, that happens. But sometimes it's also because we haven't in the relationship really talked about what works for us, what gets our juices flowing. And it's and it can be awkward to talk about. The media shows us that, like, if you have love, if you have attraction, sex just happens.
Yeah,
and maybe that happens.
It's just magical.
Just magic. And maybe that happens in the like new relationship energy, limerence part of a relationship. It just flows. But
it's much easier at the beginning.
Yeah. But for a lot of couples, or different relationship structures, it does it wanes, and that ease of just like, we just want to tear each other's clothes off or whatever.
Right.
So that and you didn't have to talk about it at the beginning of the relationship. It just happened.
Right.
So we learn how to talk about and first own what we like, what works for us, what our we call it core desires are, or core erotic themes. And what's interesting is that a lot of people believe that, like, we come to sex for certain activities. I really like it when this happens, or like this position is my favorite, or I have a fantasy about this certain configuration or something like that. And we like to think in my practice and in some of the learnings I've done that we actually come to sex for a feeling state that we want to achieve. And our hottest sex happens when we're in that feeling state. And so helping people kind of get clear on what they're coming to the intimacy for. Like, to go back to your example of like enjoying age play, you know, so that's an activity that you really like. But I'm just curious from you, like, what's the feeling state when you can just really go there and it's really fun?
I think, you know, it's something to do with like daddy and little girl. And it's not just, okay, so the feeling state would be something about like surrender and like not, it's sort of like possession, but we're not really possessing each other, but it's just in the present moment of possession.
And knowing you, I'm going to take a guess, and this is what I'll do in a session even. Like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I want to like see if any of this resonates with you. Is there anything about being adored as the little girl?
Yeah, definitely.
So that feeling state of being adored.
Me wrong for, you know, even like being a bad girl. I'm a good girl.
You're a good girl.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So being like daddy's special, adored good girl.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, I just got goosebumps thinking about that. You are a good girl. And so knowing that like that feeling state is so juicy for you, then there's lots of different avenues you can take. And you know that like some of this age play stuff just really works. It tickles. So that might be part of like an experience you like to create over and over again. And very often with couples, they've never considered what's the feeling state I want. I just know it when I get it. And that's the memories I think of like.
And I'm not wanting to be conscious about it.
It's not that they don't want to be. It just hasn't occurred.
Just aren't.
It's just not. It's like we don't know what we don't know.
Right.
You know, we know there's certain things that we know we don't know. Like, I don't know how to build a rocket that could get to the moon. And I know that I don't know that. But you know, until some things are introduced to you, like the concept of rockets,
right,
then you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
So a lot of times this is a brand new concept.
Right.
And so it's wonderful to build the bridge between a couple for the feeling states that they want to achieve, and then find the avenues that we can try to get to that feeling state.
Right. So what are some of the other tools that you're interested in exploring with people when they hit bumps or landmines or, you know, relationship changes?
Yeah.
You know, what are some of the ways, like if they're moving or something?
So, yeah, like we've talked about these big life stuff that happens.
Big life changes.
Yeah, it can take the wind out of our sails for connection and intimacy
and time.
And time. Yeah. And honestly, it depends on what the person or the people are seeking. You know, if they want to continue to have sexual intimacy and touch as part of this, you know, time period where maybe in the past it would have completely put the brakes on it. Sometimes we just need to offload on the stressors, take some of that, like, you know, the pot lid off the boiling pot. And then sometimes people just want to dive into like feeling that connection in the session space so they can get some of that good feeling and they can go home and continue it. So we might play some embodiment games, like, and do some touch skill stuff and some
so a little bit closer to cuddling.
Some cuddling, but also just there's a lot of different ways to touch and be touched, and mapping pleasure for yourself and for your partner. Like literally doing either me touching or the partner's touching, and really just being clear on like what feels good. This is working for me, or that's not really my thing. And
what would be better is, or something. How do you deal with, like, if something's not working for you, how do you deal with that in a loving way?
It's exactly that, in a loving way. Like most people want to give their partner pleasure.
Totally.
It's
like,
hot.
You wouldn't be touching me if you didn't want to give me pleasure.
Yeah.
But how can I make this better for myself and for you? Because I know you want to touch me in a nice way.
Yeah. There's literally exercises we do that are one about tuning to yourself. I'm going to touch you for my pleasure so that you can catch my erotic energy. Because one thing that can happen is if you get really in your head, I want to do it right. And then I'm stiff or I'm nervous. Yeah. And then instead of you getting turned on, you're stiff and you're nervous. Because like we said earlier, we catch the energy.
Yeah.
And then the second part of the exercise is now like relaxing into receiving and requesting the kind of touch that you like. Because also like maybe I'm so concerned about how my body looks that I'm tense and nervous, even though you're doing fantastic touches, really erotic, sexy things I would like if I wasn't so in my head that like I'm worried about how I look, or I'm not doing enough back to you, or I'm, like relaxing into receiving is a skill to learn.
Totally.
So those would be a couple of ways.
No, it's huge. In fact, I think a lot of times we're so busy focusing on, am I doing it right? That kind of one of the things that I wonder if this, I'm just curious, do you ever have to tell people like, oh, instead of like you both 69ing at the same time, for instance, like maybe, one of you does the touching for a minute and then the other one of you does the touching for a minute. And so you're separating both the giving and receiving so that you're not feeling like both of you are trying to do both things at the same time.
You're exactly right. Like in those last two embodiment experiences, like I told you, coaching is experiential and we create a relationship. I didn't dive into that as much as I thought I would, but we slow everything down, including things like taking turns practicing a new skill, like relaxing into receiving. Because if you're trying to learn that skill, then I'm going to relax into the sensations when I am receiving touch. It's a lot to do at once to also be touching back.
Totally.
So it's kind of like, to go back to the gym analogy, you're not going to bench press 200 pounds until you start bench pressing 10 pounds and then 15 and then 20, etc. Yeah. And so it's like, it's skill building. And we give ourselves so much grace when we're trying to, learn a language or play a sport that we've never played before. But there's so much pressure to like, sex should just happen and we should be good at it. That giving ourselves reality. It's not reality. Yeah. And giving ourselves the grace. And especially because, there's not a lot of like, you can join a team to learn to be a better like basketball player, but like, where do you come to learn this stuff? Right. Well, you come to Heather Atles coaching.
That's exactly right. So let's go back to, I think we were talking about relationships and you wanted to go back to something I remember. We didn't talk about it enough. Do you remember?
Oh gosh.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, it was about the relationship lab and the distinction around traditional therapy, where I started to talk about how it's like you're a sounding board. Well, one of the fundamental skills that can be learned is to form secure attachments.
Oh, yes, secure versus the other kind of attachment.
Yeah, anxious style. And avoidant or disorganized.
Totally.
And what we can do in the relationship lab or in coaching that we don't get to do, if I had gone for like the traditional like MFT licensing, I'm not allowed to touch you. And I'm discouraged from telling you how I feel about you in particular. But it doesn't work so well. And this is what in relationship coaching, because what we get to do is we actually get to form a relationship, and how you show up for me as, in this relationship is frequently how you're showing up in the world. And so once we've developed trust and intimacy and secure attachment, and you've had a feeling sense of that, like that muscle memory you were talking about, then I can start to give you feedback on how, you're relating to me and how that's getting in the way of how you're relating to others. Because we have an authentic relationship.
Right.
or how you're relating to me and how that is really, really working for me.
Right.
And so some of that includes touch. It definitely includes sharing our feelings. And I'll be clear, in the boundaries of my coaching, I'm not a sexuological body worker. I am a relationship, sex, and intimacy coach. So we keep our clothes on. We don't reach under the clothes, and we don't kiss. And, there's no explicit genital rubbing, and we're not going to bring each other to orgasm. Those are sort of the we can't do's. And it's a shorter list than what we can do. We can actually practice touch, and I can give you feedback on what's turning me on. And we can create an erotic energy circuit, where it's nobody's in their head. Everybody's, well, maybe you're using your brain, of course, but you're not self-conscious. When you get that, the arousal state is flowing. We're just vibing. That's what I call the erotic energy circuit.
Yeah. Let's think more about the erotic energy circuit and how do we move forward into I know that you want to kind of wrap it up and tell us where we can find you and all those good things as well, but how do we quickly move into a place of connection with each other when we're trying out new things?
Yeah, so like I was saying, it's creating that safety. For most people need to have a sense of safety, even if they're playing in some of these edgy things where they're playing with the idea of oh no, I'm not safe. I'm doing a fantasy where, or they're into, some impact play or things like that.
Right.
So just creating the safety for people to be vulnerable about what they really want, and then learn how to express it with each other in a way that's not that you're doing it wrong. It's here's what's really delicious for me. And would you want to do that with me?
Right. And I think we were sort of, we kind of glossed over non-consensual consent or rape fantasies, right? They're so difficult to get into with consciousness and consent that it definitely, it's a hugely common fantasy,
and but, so taboo.
And it's so difficult to make it work.
Yeah. But when we get into these taboo areas, here's the thing. You're allowed to think and fantasize about whatever you want. Especially if you're, say you're on the other side of it. It's very common for women to have these, I want to be raped, or I want to be abducted, or I want to be taken advantage of.
But it's still a fantasy.
But it's a fantasy.
Right.
But on the other side of
this
it,
person,
I want to, say you're the dominant person.
Yeah.
And I want to do this to someone. That's very taboo to talk about.
Totally.
So as long as no one is being harmed, that's the line. We can go into all these dark places and do no harm.
Safe and consensual.
And it's safe and consensual, and there's agency, and there's power in it, even in the submissive role, as we were talking about. There's power in that.
Totally. Yeah. So how can people find you?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking. So again, my name is Heather Atles, and Atlas is spelled A-T-L-E-S, not like the Book of Maps or the Greek god, A-T-L-E-S. And you can find me at heatheratles.com.
And where can people find you? I know you're on Facebook and lots of other places.
Yes, and I'm going to get better and better at doing social media. So at Heather Atles and on Instagram. And then my Facebook page is Heather Atles, Relationship, Sex, and Intimacy Coach or Coaching. It's one of those.
Okay, super duper.
Yeah, and I think I'm on Threads. I have a goal now to post more, because I do want to engage with people beyond the four walls of my office.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can.
It's so nice to get out.
You can go to my website, heatheratles.com. And if any of this resonates with you, or you're excited by anything I said, or it's even bringing up some big feelings that you don't know what to do with, I am always happy to do a free 30-minute Zoom consultation.
Oh.
And you can just book it right on my website and pick a time that works for you. And we can meet and discuss some of these things, because I'm really in service of people having the most pleasure, the juiciest relationships possible, feeling the most self-expressed, the most like in your body, the most like, I don't know, what's another word for pleasure? Just joy and satisfaction.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's possible.
Right.
There's a science to love.
Yeah, there's a science to pleasure.
There's a science to connection.
Yeah.
And that's why I wear my oxytocin necklace as a reminder of that.
Yeah,
And
totally.
so, yeah, please do reach out. I would be so happy to talk to you. We can set up a 30-minute free consult and see if it's a good fit.
Yay.
All
Thanks
right.
so much, Heather.
I love you, Monika.
I love you.
I'm so glad to be here with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for being on Sexploration with Monika. Sexploration with Monika.
Heard you singing